Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's panel, Overcoming Cannabis Marketing Challenges in 2021. I'm Erin Roche. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Candy and Flowers, a PR and marketing agency for the cannabis industry. I'm really excited to have this panel of guests here today to talk about the marketing landscape today, the challenges they're facing and how they're overcoming them to help everyone in the audience really understand what brands are up against and the creative ways we're getting around some of the regulatory environment that we're up against. So I'd like to first start off by introducing the folks we have on the panel. Colby McKenzie, co-founder of Enlighten. We have Eugenio Garcia, the publisher and founder of Cannabis Now Media. Joe Hodas, the CMO of Wana Brands, and Nicole Cooper, the Senior Director of Marketing at Sunday Goods. I hope I got that right, Nicole. Apologies. So I would love for you guys just to start off and tell us a little bit about yourselves and the company that you're with. Colby, why don't you go ahead and start?
Yeah, so Colby McKenzie, as Erin mentioned, co-founder of Enlighten. We are a leading can tech company working with, at this point, I think 1,400 plus cannabis dispensaries and brands, kind of stemming the entirety of retail technology and marketing technology, helping customers and product brands really understand and figure out that entirety of the journey from kind of outside of cannabis all the way into the retail environment in and of itself.
Eugenio.
I'm Eugenio Garcia, the publisher of Cannabis Now magazine and CEO of Cannabis Now Media. We've been printing magazines in the cannabis space for almost 10 years now and have been publishing a hemp magazine for the last 3.5, 4 years. We have a social media following of just over 4 million. And we love telling stories about brands and connecting their stories to customers. This has been an amazing decade, and it's definitely a paradigm shift in social consciousness globally. And being able to capture this moment in time and predict the future and talk about the present has been such a blessing, and I'm really happy to be here with you all.
Great, thank you. And Joe.
Hi, Joe Hodas. I'm Chief Marketing Officer for Wana Brands. Thank you for having me today. And I've been in this business for about 7 years now. Spent 4 years with Dixie Brands as their Chief Marketing Officer, and then have had other touches of within the industry, including a publicly traded ancillary business called General Cannabis, and then a hardware and software company called GoFire. We were making a metered dose inhaler. So really have touched various parts of the industry, but I'm back kind of at home now with an edibles company, and started with Wana in March of last year. So I've been there for just about a year. Started actually the first week of quarantine here in Colorado. So that was an interesting start to a new job. Haven't really actually met all of my coworkers yet, but yeah, so have seen a lot of change and growth in marketing since I started at Dixie, which was the very first week of adult use legalization in Colorado. It is vastly different over the last 7 years, and I have no doubt it will be double or triple different in the next 7 years. So,
Great. And Nicole.
Hi, Nicole Cooper here. I am the Senior Director of Marketing for Sunday Goods and the Pharm. We are a vertically integrated cannabis company located in Arizona. So we are, seed to sale. We just opened our first retail space last year in a pandemic. It was very exciting, and something I honestly recommend to anybody who's thinking about opening up retail. We are really specializing in flower. So that's kind of our bread and butter. Is we have flower products across, eighths through half ounces, pre-rolls, and we are kicking off a really great oil program. So we're really excited about that for the years to come.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. As I said, this is a great panel. We have a lot of knowledge to share. So I would love to start out, Joe and Nicole, by asking you guys a little bit about, on the brand side, what are some of your biggest challenges in cannabis product or brand marketing today? And I would say today, given the environment, but also today as we're still living in COVID, and I know that's changed a lot of the strategies and tactics you've all used in the past. So, would love to hear a little bit more about that. Nicole, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. It's an interesting question. I think that this question probably varies across product category, but the things that we struggle with and that we experienced in California as well as here in Arizona is there isn't much proprietary, information or, anything that goes into flower. So when you think about branding, branding flower, it's really about brand. It's really about getting your communication right and succinct about why is your flower better than another grower. So that's something that I think, most brands kind of struggle with market to market, is really kind of being a differentiator and a market leader for the quality of your flower and finding the right way to reach your audience. Where, I think you don't see, at least, in our medical market in Arizona, we didn't see a ton of brand loyalty, right? It was kind of this, price game, promotional game, and something that we started to see kind of shift over time. And when you really got to look into who was your loyal customer, it was those people that you really got to, really communicate why was this flower better, diving into the cannabinoid profile. It's not just about potency. So I think those are some of the tough things, is that when you don't have kind of this proprietary technology, what really is the big differentiator outside of brand? So it's relying on your brand to really communicate and be this, look and feel that somebody is going for. Maybe we skew a bit more lifestyle. So that's why somebody would want to buy Sunday Goods over another brand in the state, in Arizona or California, et cetera. But that's one big thing that we talk about a lot, is how do you really brand flower when there isn't that kind of proprietary, little nugget to hang your hat on. Maybe like, in edibles, I know that there's some interesting things going on in the market, proprietary wise, with nanotechnology. So I'd love to hear Joe's point of view on that. But that's one area that we really kind of we see to be tough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And actually, I was going to say, the nanotechnology, or in our case, it's a slightly different take on that, but essentially being able to research and find new technologies that add value to the edibles is a different way to approach a product from a differentiation standpoint than you can maybe with flower, where it's really genetics based. And I think the consumer also doesn't always fully understand genetics and or why one strain is better than a different strain, for that matter. But I would add to that, we also have the ability to do things like adding our custom blended terpenes. So we took the top 30 terpenes of each class, indica, sativa, and hybrid, and we were able to make these custom terpene blends that we were able to reinfuse back into the edibles that help create a specific and also replicable experience across all the markets we go into. So that's why if someone has a Wana product in Colorado, it should be the same in Ohio, it should be the same in California. And I think that is a really great differentiator for edibles companies versus flower. Now, that being said, we still have plenty of challenges. So, and I would say that one of the biggest challenges I face right now is really understanding where the consumer is in the cycle of, I shifted, when I first got to Wana a year ago, I shifted immediately into a direct consumer kind of approach with our marketing, because I saw that between quarantine, between curbside, between delivery in California, all of those things were really pointing to the fact I needed to get to that consumer before they get to the dispensary, because they were beginning to make their decision prior to that, right? But we also have this whole new universe of consumers who, when the industry was declared as essential, and they were looking for solutions in the context of cannabis, how can I help with my anxiety or my sleep or these other issues, those new consumers who have no baseline knowledge of cannabis necessarily, they were still needing bud tenders and support and education. So finding that balance as we're making this shift, and Eugenio said earlier that we're maybe kind of on the tail end of this, which I think we all hope and agree is true. Do they shift back into the dispensary? Do I refocus and retarget in the dispensary for my marketing spend? Do I continue to go direct to the consumer with the information? So those are big questions to ask, because there's also a different level of education in every market that we go into. Arizona is probably experiencing that right now. Right now, you have a legacy market around medical, but you've also now got recreational, so you've got new consumers coming into the market. How do we speak to both of them appropriately so that we're giving them the right information to make the best decision, but also understanding that they probably have different levels of understanding and knowledge of the product base. So it's really getting into the mindset of the consumer still. How are they shopping? What information do they need to make the right decisions? And then, of course, providing the best product possible.
And then you have to do that on a state-by-state level, right? Because every single state's consumer is in such a different space, whether it's like New Jersey that's thinking about things in a very different light from California. It's interesting in that you have to put on a different hat with every single state and try and think about consumers in a vacuum in that state almost. Yep, absolutely. And then how do we build a national brand around that? That's the challenge for 21 for me.
Well, that's interesting and brings up a good point. There was an Adweek story at the beginning of this year that the headline was 2021 could usher in a golden age of cannabis marketing. And I absolutely agree. Some of the brands that we're seeing coming out of the States are great. They're very well done. However, there still are a lot of restrictions in cannabis in terms of the channels that we can use. I mean, earlier this year, California said no more billboards, for dispensaries. We still have Instagram accounts being taken down, what seemingly at a whim. I guess the question is, neither of you said channel-based restrictions are one of your, biggest pain points, but I'm sure that's in there. How do you get around those? What are you doing to find sort of alternate ways of reaching those customers throughout the customer journey?
Getting real creative. I'll kind of kick this one off. So we've had to take some risks, and I think that there needs to be some of that allowance within cannabis marketing to try different things on specific channels with the possible risk that you might, get shut down on, whether it's Instagram or, Google, or, if you're doing programmatic, et cetera. We've kind of experimented over the last year and a half with digital advertising, where I think we've really kind of figured out what are the things that will serve us, what are the things that we can kind of put out there that are acceptable, to have our ads out there on other advertiser pages, other publications, so that we can get awareness, drive traffic to our site, get in front of people before they enter the dispensary, before they're ready to make that buying decision. Based off of keyword searches and, lookalike audiences, et cetera. So we've had to just be very experimental and kind of, upfront know that not everything is going to work out. But, the digital space is such it's such a opportunity, and there's only such a small window that's really open for us as cannabis marketers and advertisers. That is something that I hope changes, hopefully pretty dramatically over this next year, 2 years. But, in terms of, the other kind of pieces of getting creative, at least in Arizona, while we were medical, there was actually a pretty strong concerted effort to create this medical community of like 300,000, card holders. And so there was actually pretty decent access, whether it was through e-blasts or specific websites that we knew people would frequent. Granted, those spaces got pretty crowded and actually started to get pretty expensive because there was only so many impressions you could get, so many days that you could send an e-blast. So those were some ways that we, in terms of targeting the medical audience, was really just getting specific with where we knew the actual customer was going to be going, the patient, I should say. So that's something that served us really well in Arizona. Now, obviously, flipping into rec, things have changed. And so, still we're looking at more local publications, things that we know are going to be reaching residents, or at least, we've got a big snowboard population in the Phoenix area and within Tucson as well. So
you say snowboard?
Snowbird.
Oh, snowbird. I was like, snowboarding. You're in the desert,
I heard
right?
snowboard too, and I was like,
There
wait,
is
am I
snowboarding
missing
here.
something?
Yeah, go up to northern Arizona. I mean, Arizona's honestly got something for everybody, but we have a big snowbird population. So a lot of folks coming in from Canada, a lot of folks coming in from Illinois. So trying to now kind of pivot, where do we want that additional spend go to reach those people that can now come and shop with us? Still challenging, but opens up a lot more windows.
Joe, what about you?
Well, I'm just wondering if that statement means that if we're entering into the golden age, does that mean we've been in the dark ages pretty much? Because it sometimes feels like that, but I've never thought about it that way. So, we've actually been relying a lot on interesting endemic technologies. So things like Enlighten, right? So platforms that are for the cannabis industry, in the cannabis industry, that give us access to consumers, and that we're not relying on what might be a broader set of impressions, let's say through doing programmatic or through social advertising. But we also use platforms like, for example, Zoltrain is a great company that we work with, and they do a rich SMS platform. So when the dispensary sends out a text blast, which in our opinion is really one of the best ways to see conversion and to drive traffic for a brand into a dispensary, they're actually going to a page that has facts about Wana, about the product. It gives a lot deeper education with buy now links in there so they can reserve the product ahead of time. So using platforms like that, along with things like a bud tender incentive platform that we use, and bud tender incentives, by the way, are not necessarily allowed in all markets, but in markets where it's allowed, that's a great way to actually spend dollars to reach the consumer through the bud tender, because we know that if we do the promotions correctly, that bud tender will be incented to share our information and to convert our customers for us in the store. So really looking at those burgeoning technologies that allow us access to the cannabis consumer directly and distinctly, until such time as we believe that a mass market approach to media would make sense for us.
Mm-hmm. Eugenio, how would from your perspective as on the publisher side, what are you seeing in terms of the evolution of your own outlet, but some of these other media outlets that folks are advertising with?
Sure. And it's constantly evolving, and I think it was in the dark ages, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I think in the last three to 4 years, there's been a very accepted rhythm of cannabis advertising. And whether that has minor setbacks, like you talked about the billboards or Instagram accounts getting shut down, we've reached at least some level of exposure that is normal to us and to brands. But I don't think we're going to go into a golden age in 2021. I think, if anything, there is pent up demand for brands to express themselves and to be seen. And that what we will see in the next 10 to 20 months is a release of that need, especially with a lot of brands overcoming the challenges and finding a very, very strong amount of success, specifically in the retail space. We know of many, many retailers who are up 40, 50, 60% by year end of 2020. And now they're like, well, heck, let's spend some money on marketing. But where I see the golden age coming is in the next 5 to 6 years. Let's assume federal legalization is going to happen. When it's open playing field and the larger brands who have been incubating, even brands like Wana, who are leaders in the category, they're just scratching the surface of what's possible. And smaller regional brands like Sunday Goods, they've got a great relationship with a wonderful magazine called Broccoli, and they're consistently in some of their premium spots. And so they're attached quality storytellers. And on Wana's platform, there's a podcast section, there's a learning section. And so what I actually see to be the golden age in the future, not that it's going to come next year, but it will come eventually, is the storytelling that's going to happen with these brands in an earned media way. when brands are breaking the rules and disrupting the space through entertainment and through knowledge, they're going to get exposure naturally through Instagram. They're going to get it naturally through major outlets like BuzzFeed or New York Times or Discovery Channel. And when people get exposed to these brands in an organic way, in macro capacity, that's really where you're going to see the conversions happening. And right now we're stuck in this realm of how do we get the bud tenders to talk about our product so that the consumer will buy it. And so we're not in the dark ages, but I think we have a long way to go before we're in normal territory for normal brands.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really great point on kind of the earned media side. And, I think partnerships is something that I am going to be really excited to see where that actually goes. And when we think about, we do influencer partnerships right now, of course, and I actually think they're super valuable for us, particularly kind of in a more regional sense. So we can be, very kind of specific with the type of person that we want to be affiliating with. But what I'm excited to see, especially for some of these MSOs like Wana, at what level are we really going to start seeing maybe, athletic partnerships with pro athletes or, singers or actors that are going to kind of, have the courage, so to speak, to kind of flip over and start really advocating for cannabis at that level. I think we see a little bit of it now. Most of what I see are, celebrities kind of launching their own cannabis line and brand or store, whatever the case may be, but not necessarily in this, kind of sponsorship partnership relationship just yet.
It's so tricky from the sports perspective when their leagues are telling them it's illegal to take this. And then you only see ex-athletes for that very reason. Like the last thing a current athlete can do is go on record saying that they're pro cannabis or any cannabis company when it's like in bold letters in the league mandate that you can't consume or be.
Yeah. And I think we will start to see that change, right? I think that's on the horizon, and, maybe if not pro athletes for the time being, but even starting to see more of these, veteran athletes come through and, start saying, hey, cannabis has helped me for X, Y, and Z reason. This is why I'm partnered with so-and-so.
Well, you saw it with the MMA, right? The second they said it was an okay substance, you saw a bunch of people jump across the line and say, hey, I'm happy to sponsor this stuff. So I agree. As you see it in other sports become something that's less taboo and not necessarily something that's drug tested for, I'm sure there's numbers of people lining up to be representatives.
Well, the NBA just stopped testing for THC, and we've seen so many influencers team up with CBD companies as like the first wave into the space, and we've seen a lot of musicians coming into THC. But I think that where the paradigm shift will really start to break through again is with athletes getting into THC. We're actually we're going to be participating in an event in Arizona in May at the Biltmore. And it's specifically 100 athletes from different categories are coming together for a 2-day conference just to learn about cannabis. And it's going to be a golfing event. And these athletes have come together and say, hey, we want to invest in cannabis. We want to learn about cannabis. We're going to come together for 48 hours and just get exposed to brands and to learn about it. So that's definitely coming in 2021. And these are 90% of these athletes are actively playing in the leagues that they're in right now.
Mm-hmm. Colby, we're talking about sort of the golden age and what we think the future will be, but what are cannabis, as somebody who is talking to brands and cannabis companies every day and helping them reach their target customers, what today can brands be doing to reach their customers throughout the customer journey?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we talk about the golden age, and if we're going to get there, it's going to be with both hands tied behind our back and blindfolded by COVID. And the hurdles that everybody's having to overcome to get to this ultimate goal is is probably unprecedented. And Joe made a point earlier that I think is important about considering the D2C component, because historically D2C wasn't even something that you even registered in the cannabis space. And Enlighten, from our perspective, pre-COVID, we were all in on kind of actual place-based advertising. So we had screens inside a number of dispensaries. It really focused on educating both the bud tender and the consumer at that point of sale. And then obviously had a 43-foot mobile dispensary that has been parked for a year plus right now, really doing a lot of in-person activations and events and things like that. And so you basically take what has historically been everything from a marketing budget that a cannabis company had, and overnight say, hey, everything you've done for the last 5 years, you can't really do much anymore outside of the point of sale, which is now at its worst dropped down to about 50% store traffic, and now is back at about 75% nationally. So we've seen a pretty quick bounce back in people returning inside of the four walls of the dispensary. But at the same time, you now have to recognize and understand, to Joe's point, the direct to consumer approach and educating outside the four walls. And so one thing that we've really focused on is understanding that the cannabis consumer is not just somebody that's visiting cannabis websites. This person, much like a person that wears sneakers, doesn't just live on sneaker websites. Like, a cannabis consumer is going to other places and doing other things. And if you're able to tap into those mediums, a lot of times you become differentiated, because it's something that's like, whoa, I didn't realize that this brand could advertise here. I'm looking at GQ magazine right now or something. And so one thing that we've done in trying to curate that consumer experience outside the four walls is, yes, we've historically had that point of sale access, but now we're trying to marry that with access directly to the cannabis consumer digitally, not only through cannabis publishers, but also understanding that these people are human beings and do a lot outside of cannabis. Can we reach them other places and make sure that we are front of mind and really something that's differentiated at that point?
Interesting.
That's something we talk a lot about, just to jump in on that. I mean, it's a lot about persona building and trying to kind of map out and get as much feedback as possible. So, with this flip to rec just a couple weeks ago, what we're doing is sending out surveys to our new customers coming through to see us, understanding what their education proficiency is, what sort of information they would like, but then also asking them questions just even about their interests in life, right? Trying to understand a little bit more about who they are, sites that they might frequent, right? If we want to kind of transition to a digital lens, just kind of trying to meet them where they are based off of, their interests. So it's a great point.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think historically people have been very narrow in what they view the cannabis consumer, but our data and the audience segments that we pull, it's quite different. Like, there is literally not one type of person or one segment of the US population that isn't a cannabis consumer. I'm not saying everybody is, but it's spanning pretty much every demographic out there.
Yeah. But I think, the other piece too is, even if you have somebody who's perhaps not a user quite yet, but they're curious, right? That's also part of a marketing strategy. How are you reaching those people? How are you trying to destigmatize, make your brand approachable to them, and meeting them again where they are, whether it's digitally, whether it's in person, et cetera, so that, perhaps down the road, maybe it's a month from now, maybe it's 6 months from now, but when they finally kind of, have that light bulb click, they come and see you.
What practical advice do you guys have for brands that might have a smaller marketing budget? Are there certain, marketing channels that are more of a priority than others? Kind of what's your advice for those companies that are starting out or dealing with the realities of budget constraints? Joe, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you that one to start.
Sure. Eugenio said earlier, which I totally agree with, PR is a huge channel, right? Always has been. PR is really how Dixie became what Dixie became in terms of the cannabis world, and its visibility was almost entirely PR. So PR is not Not to say that it's free, because you always have people that are involved in making these things happen. Now, of course, what it requires is that you have something differentiated and something to talk about, right? So you can't be a Me Too brand and leverage PR, because you probably aren't going to get a whole lot of it. But I think PR is a good channel. I also think social media, also another example where you have to have something differentiated, but if you do it right and you do it well, it's a great way to gain additional exposure for your brand without too much cost involved. But the last piece is, and people always, when you get together with marketers, you sometimes forget to talk about the fact that brand runs all the way through the DNA of a company, right? So it's everything from the products to your customer service to how you build your website. There's all of these elements to brand, right? And so my point in saying that is that I think one of the most important things that young brands have to do in a market, assuming that they're in, let's say, one market, is focus on the blocking and tackling of making sure that they deliver what they say they're going to deliver, that they handle issues when they come up, that they are focused on consistency in the product quality that they're delivering. I think those are really critical parts of brand that are easily overlooked in favor of the consumer touching elements, direct consumer touching elements. But I think that that's a really important thing that young brands can do, is really have a focus on that operational side of the brand.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about local, I know, Nicole, you've mentioned local at least once or twice now. For a small brand, we have to assume that if you're going to be competitive and the people we're talking about, that they have a certain amount of quality. If you don't have the quality in your company and in your product, you're not going to survive, no matter if you throw $1 million at it. I've seen them this last 3 or 4 years, tens of millions of dollars being spent in marketing. And because the company, whether it's leadership or product or a combination of both, it doesn't stack up, you're not going to hold on to that. You might get 1 or 2 purchases out of it, but you're not going to hold on to it. So a small brand with a small budget, assuming that they've got the right company leadership and product in place, focus local and focus on education. One of the things that's highly overlooked in this space right now is that we are getting a lot of new people wanting to be interested in cannabis, whether they want to eat it or smoke it or put it on their skin or whatever it is, and they're interacting with it. They're overdosing, basically. And it's scaring people off, like people who haven't ever smoked in their lives, or they smoked in college and now they're just coming back to it. You smoke the wrong joint, you eat the wrong edible, you might not ever come back to cannabis. And whether it's a psychological benefit, a medical benefit, a recreational benefit, you might put yourself out of that ability to enjoy the product for another 10, 20 years just because of one bad experience. So if you're a small brand and you have a small budget, focus on your 10-block radius, your 10-mile radius, your 100-mile radius. And it's challenging in COVID. So hopefully we can get out of that. And this summer, do those micro events, do the micro educations that guide the consumer through the process of how much do I need to enjoy, where do I need to enjoy it, with who do I need to enjoy it, for what do I need to enjoy it. And if you can be that brand who shepherds the new consumer through that process, you're going to have a consumer for life. And then you can replicate that in the macro. One of the brands that I've seen do this, that I've been watching for 6 years now, is Select Oil. I was aware of them when they were out of Oregon, in 1 or 2 shops, and followed one of their founders, Cameron Forney, through his journey, and now with a brilliant marketing director, Jason White, who was brought over by Beat by Dre and is running the Select program. And even today, Select is focused on education, and they're also focused on lifestyle. The amount of effort that they're putting in to directly touching an individual in an authentic way is mind-blowing, but they were doing it when they were just going after 100 people and not 100,000. So you can start local. You don't have to take over the world overnight.
And that's one thing that I've seen brands make massive mistakes on, is they say, I have this budget and the budget's not nearly big enough to pull off what their vision is. And so they're trying to spread themselves thin across a number of mediums and a number of things and really wide. And when you do that, you miss on everything because if you spend $5 here and $5 there, that $5 doesn't go anywhere. So much to your point, Eugenio, if you just hyper concentrate and really focus on what gets me from point A to point B as a brand and put all of my money in that one basket, you'll actually execute and see success rather than somebody convincing you to spend $5 in 15 different spots.
Yeah, I think that's both of you. Yeah, totally aligned with that thinking. It is staying local. It's being very realistic with where are you going to reach your buyer. I think a lot of times for brands, right, it's you lose a lot of control when you're in a retailer, right? And, Joe, you made this comment earlier about bud tender programs and bud tender incentives. And if that's really kind of who holds the power for that point of sale and the education and getting something in a customer's hand, whether it's your brand or somebody else's, I do think that really honing in on bud tender education, bud tender trials of your product, compliant trials of getting your product in the hands of people actually selling it is probably some of the most impactful, work that you can do and budget that you can spend. Depending on varying levels of budget, kind of taking that compliant trial, consumer product trial into the store as well, where if you can run maybe, short-term promotions, something to create a little bit of buzz around your product to just, again, drive that trial. It is all about getting your product in somebody's hands to try it, for them to come back and try it again. And particularly when, again, the bud tender holds so much power within this industry, that's an area that I won't ignore, and I don't think we can ignore for a while.
And one question, I get this asked to me all the time, and it's an equation that you're constantly having to balance. And I'd be curious y'all's opinion on this. Is like, you have to build a brand and a narrative around that brand to actually find long-term success. But a brand that doesn't have $1 billion to spend also has to see some level of revenue tied to that to be able to return that back into the marketing budget to keep building. And so I feel like I always get asked, like, well, how much should we allocate here and there? And like, yes, if you don't build a brand and tell a good story, you're never going to be successful long term. But at the same time, I completely understand that if you don't make any money, you're also not going to be around long term. And so one thing that is an exercise that I go through with all the brands that we work with is really trying to strike a perfect balance there. And so that's one thing that I'd love y'all's opinion on, because I'd like to relay it back to all the clients that we work with and trying to find that perfect balance.
Is the question, what is the perfect balance?
Between brand building and kind of really hyper-focused on ROAS and revenue driving pieces.
Gotcha.
Probably up to the board.
I'll jump in.
How much money do we get?
I'll jump in and say, if you're going to sprint or go to war, you have to have the right tools. So, I don't think that it's a function of, 20% of the budget or 30% or $1 million or $500,000. I think it's more about what's your target. And when you attack that target, make sure that you have labor in place, the distribution in place, and all the different ingredients that being successful, what you need to be successful, that you have those. I see a lot of money wasted in marketing where they'll spend a bunch on marketing and hey, they have a great product, but they don't have the distribution, or they don't have the customer service, or their packaging is falling apart. And it's really keeping your eye on all of the different divisions and departments of what makes a company run successfully. And once you have that in place, then the budget will be able to do its work. So I don't know if that answers your question, but being prepared for the growth is equally as important as having the budget to pay for that marketing to drive the growth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. But at the end of the day, the marketing person's still got to allocate that budget, cut that dollar up and spend it somewhere.
I think though, the part of what you're asking though, I think it comes down to that marketer understanding the channel. We just had a discussion a second ago about, what for companies that are smaller, don't have the budget, what are great ways to brand build. I think that a marketer who understands both the budget side as well as the channel side of where they're going with their marketing dollars would recognize that they could find, use billboards. I could find one billboard that's really cheap and put that out there. But you would recognize that if you don't have the right level of impressions and the right, I'm totally blank on the word right now, but point is that if you spend money on that billboard, that's a waste of dollars, right? So creating a strategy that leverages channels that match your budget is a better way to brand build versus, I think, thinking about what are brand building tactics and then trying to back into doing those tactics without understanding your budget implications, because you could end up spending dollars on things that you shouldn't be spending them on, right? Because unless you can spend $100,000 on out of home, you probably shouldn't be spending any dollars on out of home. So if that kind of makes sense, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, my biggest thing is if you have a limited budget, you better be able to track those dollars, every single cent. And there are plenty of platforms, right? I mean, like, I think text is a great, option where we know that we see an incredible return on our spend for text messaging as a channel for retail. And maybe, and we're starting to see a lot of brands start doing, text messaging as well outside of the retail space. So growing that channel, because you can really see who's coming in and spending dollars towards your brand or towards your store. So limited budgets for me is always show me where that money is going. What is the return on that investment? And then we can look to do maybe more of the brand plays where it's harder to track immediate ROI. We always know that there is some, and that, sometimes it takes a little bit longer to convert, billboards being one of them, starting to get a bit smarter with how you can actually track conversions for that, based off of, mobile data, et cetera. But, just really looking for those channels where you can get specific tracking data.
Do you know where your CBD comes from? I'm Brittany Carbone, founder and CEO of Tonic CBD and co-founder of Tricola Farms and Bardo Labs. Together, we form a purpose-driven, vertically integrated hemp supply chain focused on ensuring quality, integrity, and sustainability at every stage of our process, from soil to oil. Whether you're a brand, consumer, or distributor, traceability and transparency should be top of mind, because let's face it, not all CBD is created equal. Our conscious and sustainable supply chain is one of our primary advantages here at Tonic, but here's the good news. We want to share that advantage with you. By partnering with Bardo Labs, you can enjoy sourcing that adds value to your brand story while ensuring consumer confidence in your product. All of our extracts are single origin. They're sourced from our certified organic hemp flower, hand cultivated on our amazing family-owned farm in upstate New York. We offer low MOQs to help you get started and are super proud of our social equity program, which seeks to provide greater opportunity for Black and brown-owned businesses to have ownership in the space by significantly lowering the barriers to entry and offering up our resources and network to help them grow and thrive. Tricola Farms and Bardo Labs also offer consulting services to help you build out cost-effective, sustainable, high-efficiency cultivation and extraction operations. Our team of experts are here to answer any questions you may have, so please feel free to visit bardolabs.com to learn more and get in touch. If you're interested in learning more about our finished product line, Tonic CBD, you can head over to tonicvibes.com or follow us on Instagram at tonic_CBD.
We talked a little bit about a national brands in cannabis, and the fact that that's not really possible now. But there are brands like Wana where you're in a lot of markets and you're doing really well. So I'm going to start with you with this question. Federal legalization could be on the horizon, however long that takes. I know things are very fast and very slow in cannabis at the same time. But with that, we're going to see a lot of, or I think we'll see other brands, maybe mainstream brands coming into cannabis that are going to have much larger budgets, that are going to be able to build national brands. What do you think, what should brands be doing now to prepare for federal legalization? Is there anything that, that brands can be doing in advance, sort of knowing that that's going to happen?
Well, that's a big question. I think one of the things that we can do, and we are doing, I think many brands are doing this, is that we're building an internal knowledge base of the cannabis consumer, of the various channels for distribution. And I don't think even with legalization that's going to change overnight, right? In terms of state by state regulation, some of the challenges that we face in terms of reaching our consumers, only being able to be purchased in dispensary, all that good stuff. I don't think it's going to change just with legalization. So while bigger brands may come in and they may have bigger dollars and bigger budgets, I really think, and maybe I'm not even thinking this, but they're going to need cannabis, the existing cannabis companies, if they want to be successful, to really understand the cannabis consumer and how to reach that cannabis consumer with the right messages. Because there's one thing I know about the cannabis consumer, whether that's the current consumer or even the Candy Curious consumer, like we were talking about earlier, is that they are a savvy consumer when it comes to cannabis products. So, company X, Y, or Z that comes in, that strolls on in and says, well, we're going to start, marketing. I can't think of a good example. It's late in the day, but it's something ridiculous, right? Cannabis consumer knows that, and they feel that, and that is going to last
them in like the first week of their marketing campaign, right?
It's going to absolutely. If they lack that authenticity, if they don't understand the cannabis consumer, which if they're not paying attention to this space now, and I've had this discussion with CPG companies where I'm like, you guys need to be looking at this today, now, to understand it, to be ready for 2 to 3 years from now. So if they're not looking at it now, I don't think they're going to be able to come in and just run roughshod. I think they're going to require a partnership or relationship. So what can we do to best build for that? I think we build distribution. I think we build IP within our companies. I also think we build an understanding of the cannabis consumer and how to reach that cannabis consumer. And I think the proof point is really in terms of revenue and growth for companies. And I think there's enough companies in this space that are growing at a fast enough clip that someone coming in from the outside might look at that and say, oh, I think those guys are doing something right.
Yeah, I think a strategy that time will tell if it's going to work, but I'm seeing it happening out there is in two strategies. Number one, super high quality merchandise, whether it's clothing or cannabis accessories like ashtrays and lighters and glass pieces. There are some brands out there that are putting out really, really phenomenal products that you can buy nationally and be connected to the brand. And maybe you're only available in California, but your merch and your products can go nationally and internationally. That's a way to get your toe in the door of the minds of the people that will be your future consumer. A brand that I'm watching do that is there's a really cool company out there that that is focused on that. And when you do that, you can reach any consumer anywhere. Also with CBD companies, a lot of brands that have THC and CBD, they are selling CBD nationally under one of their parent company brands. And then they have THC just in Colorado or THC just in California. But because of their CBD expression, they're expressing nationally.
Yep. You can also protect your brand that way from an IP perspective, which I know a lot of people have done CBD for that reason.
Yeah. It's good advice. And we'll all be waiting to see how things shake out. What do you think in terms of experiential and in terms of in dispensary? We touched on this a little bit, but that's really been on hold for the most part. I know Colby, you had mentioned that you've seen some customers come to Enlighten for for a new approach to marketing, because of COVID. Can you explain a little bit about, kind of the change in tactic, what they're using and sort of why it's working?
Yeah, that's a good question. And like I said, from our perspective, historically, we leaned almost entirely into inside the four walls of the dispensary, as well as kind of local experiential activations. And so when COVID hit, we saw, as I mentioned, that our data showed that it dipped to about 50% from historic norms, and now we're back to about 75%. But I think this is a permanent shift in the viewpoint of everything will not be inside the four walls anymore, but you need a holistic approach. You need to 100% still focus on those experiential pieces, on your presence inside the four walls, but you now need to marry that, not just during COVID, but forever forward with an approach outside the four walls. And from our perspective, we really took a very targeted approach in that cannabis brands only have so big of budgets right now. And the last thing they want to do is spray and pray and target who knows who with that budget and end up having 50% of their spend going to people that don't even consume cannabis. So what we first did is say, how do we capture the universe of cannabis consumers and make sure that if somebody spends with us, we know with great certainty that that person is either kind of curious if they're targeting that, or specifically consuming cannabis, and we know that. And then second is, again, and I think everybody's hit it on this call, the last thing a brand, let's take Nicole, for example, a brand in a specific state, the last thing they want to do is target somebody in a faraway state with their ad budget. So not only do we need to make sure we're targeting cannabis consumers, but we need to make sure we're targeting them in the specific area in which that brand is hoping to capture that consumer. And so what that took is data that historically probably was not easy to aggregate in cannabis, and really start to distill down and say, who are these people? Where are these people? And what, something that you historically would never have to say outside of cannabis, but how do we reach these people? And so that's kind of the pipes and plugs that we have been working on this year to make sure that we can fulfill that promise that your money is going towards a cannabis consumer in a market that you actually care about. And so something that I think is funny for all of us, probably less funny to us than most, but in a normal world, that's data that's both easy to find and mediums that's both easy to target. Whereas in cannabis, all this stuff we had to create kind of carte blanche on our own because it just historically hasn't existed.
I think
I'll take it back. Definitely not funny for us that have to deal with it every day, but
yeah, I think we're just going to continue to see the trend go to online and digital in terms of getting education out there and, getting better data, getting better at targeting. All of that, I think, is really starting to, be uncovered and available for cannabis companies, if they have the budgets to really go there. So that's really exciting. And, but really, I still think that there is this need for in-person for cannabis right now. And we're not quite there yet. And, I actually think it's going to take quite some time to ever get away from having, in-store activations, having brands on site, having that conversation. We've been in prohibition for a long, long time, and it's generations of people that haven't been alive, or that have been alive, for, that whole time period where it hasn't been available. So we've got a lot of kind of, legwork to do in terms of education. And I still think that in-person piece is really the most impactful. So I think it's kind of interesting, marriage between the digital piece, better targeting, better information out there, targeting your brand, but then how do you also kind of close that loop and have somebody kind of experience that second touch point in store to really make that conversion?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I've seen a little bit happening pre-COVID, and it'll be interesting to see if it comes back, is pop-up in-person educational expressions, whether it's in a mall or in a high-trafficked tourism area where you can have an educational experience and say, oh, if you want to buy the cannabis, here's the coupon for the retailer 5 blocks away. Maybe at the Grove in LA or in Miami or New York. And there's going to be these you can go out and touch the consumer without having it be a transaction. And you can do that in the physical. And I think that it will come back. And I think that is a great way to get around the fact that the competition for time, space, and focus in a dispensary is so limited that you can go do that in other mediums. And it doesn't have to be a transaction moment. It can be a tee up for when they do make a transaction, they pick your brand in the future. And you can do that in a super high traffic area if you pick the right locations.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask each of you this question, and I know this is another big one, Joe. It's what do you see as the future of cannabis marketing? And this can
definitely start with Joe with that question. Then.
Yeah.
Why do I have to start with that one?
Yeah. Leave those to him, man.
I wasn't actually going to start with you, but it sounds like
good.
the panel wants you to start.
No.
So
Joe, I'll start if you want.
Out of the way, and then make it sound smart. Okay, you start. Do it.
All right, I'll start first because our slogan is the future of cannabis is happening now. So listen, the future of marketing in the cannabis space, it's going to be very on par with how other brands market themselves, whether you're Starbucks or you're Coca-Cola or you're Nike. I mean, you have to use so many different ways to reach a consumer. And I think the bigger question is, what is the future of marketing in general? Because whatever that ends up being, that's going to be the future of cannabis marketing, because we're going to come out of this prohibition. It might take us 10 years. So I think the question is two parts. When is the future of marketing going to happen? And what will that look like? And when? It's going to be a minute. I think it could be another 10 years because it's generational. People have to be educated from the time where they're legally able to consume to when they actually want to or need to enjoy this product. And the second part of that is, what will marketing in general be? I mean, my niece and nephew, who are 19 and 20, they're the future consumers 20 years from now. And how do you balance between the baby boomers who are retiring and they need the cannabis for a lot of medical and psychological reasons, and then the Gen X and the other ones that are coming up who want to smoke a little joint before they go golfing, or they want to relax after a long day's work and they're in their early 20s. And I think that it's going to be less of a, here's a billboard, here's an ad on your social media or on your website, and it's going to be more about how does the brand affect your life in a positive way and have a relationship with the consumer. We're going to get back to authenticity. We did this with food. For a long time, we had non-organic, processed, microwavable meals coming out of World War II, and that was like the future and scientific, and people were eating horribly. And now it's gone back to farm to table. It's gone back to organic. It's going to be the same with how people make choices with products. It's going to be an authentic relationship between them and the product, and it's going to be part of their life, not just a consumer choice. And that's going to be very, very needed and expressed in the cannabis space, because when you look at cannabis consumers, they're a different kind of consumer. And for the most part, they're people that care. They care about how they're interacting with each other and with life. So they're going to want more authentic relationships out of their brand partnerships.
Yeah.
So, Nicole, I want you to talk, but I just want to add one thing real quickly before I forget, because it was just a perfect tee up for this, which is use case specific. When we begin to fulfill from a technology standpoint, from an innovation standpoint, on use case specific products, so we can have that relationship, because we provide a sleep product or we provide X, Y, and Z product that actually does what it says it's going to do. Because right now we're basically, we got a sledgehammer, right? We're just kind of using this broad-based THC, CBD, cannabinoid, profiles to affect certain outcomes. But when we really begin to develop IP around exactly targeting the issues that people have, that's how we'll begin to build that authentic relationship. And that's where I think we're going to see the future. So I will stop talking now. I apologize, Nicole. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. And I think, to your point, it's so important because it allows us to have a way more honest conversation about why you're consuming cannabis. And I think that's still something that needs to happen on a kind of a more widespread level, is just like the true honesty and authenticity of what this brings to your life and how you can use it. So I think both of you like home run points. The one thing that I'll say that is happening now, and I think it is only going to become more important as time goes on, is the corporate social responsibility of brands, of retailers within where they're spending their dollars, what they're supporting, what is their kind of stance on social issues. And I hate to say it, politics, but that's really what we're kind of seeing with the younger generations. They are voting with their dollars. They are putting their money where they believe companies, brands, align with what they personally believe for social equities and different things like that. And I think if you look in the space, I'll take the Last Prisoner Project, for example, a really amazing partnership now that's kind of infiltrated so many different brands, ancillary cannabis brands, product brands, et cetera, retailers, where everybody has gotten behind this mission that, we need to make this social change within, cannabis incarcerations, that it's no longer okay. And we've seen so much momentum. And, in fact, in the last year, just what has really been able to kind of transpire with people getting, out of prison for cannabis crimes is overwhelmingly, positive and just great for the space. So I think that is also something that, you're going to really start seeing as kind of a marketing tactic. And I shouldn't, I don't want there to be like a negative connotation around calling it a marketing strategy or a tactic, but it is going to be more important than ever that brands come out with a stance and come out with either maybe their own fund or, just supporting others with partnerships. That's going to be a big piece moving forward.
And I think to round it out, I think all those are good points. You actually stole all my good points, so I should have taken the first instead of last. But one thing I'll say is a lot of times when people think cannabis, they think, oh, it's a really hard industry. There's a lot of things and roadblocks in your way. But when it comes to the future of marketing, those roadblocks, I think, actually put us closer to the finish line than almost any other industry. And what I mean by that is a lot of people are still stuck in legacy habits and legacy ways of thinking about and doing things. But because of and by nature of the difficulties that we have to overcome, we're actually already hyper local. We're already authentic and super creative in how we have to go about marketing. And I think you're seeing trends away from some of these traditional mediums more to like, how hyper local can I be? How targeted can I be? How creative can I be in getting some of that earned media or doing something unique that makes my brand stand out? We've had to do that in the cannabis space from the very beginning. And I think while there are many disadvantages and hurdles that we have to overcome because of the difficulties legally in the space, that actually, when you think future, we actually almost get a head start by having to start day one for us is already way into the future for many of these operators in other spaces.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thought, Colby, based on a little bit of what you said. The future of marketing and more of like an actual like tool way of thinking about it is hiring talent to help you make those marketing decisions with the experience to do so, to team up with the right people. And Nicole and Joe, you can reflect this. Back in the day, when we did transactions, I would get handed $5,000 in cash from the CEO and founder. And they'd be like, yeah, put us on your back cover. Here you go. And it was 95% founder-driven marketing decisions. And what we've seen in the last year and what will be the future is highly skilled CMOs and marketing leadership teams and partnerships with communications and PR experts that can help guide the founders through the journey. It's something that was lacking for almost 10 years in the space, and only recently have there been enough consumers to drive revenue to be able to afford that talent. But now the talent who was at the Ubers or who was at the Beats by Dre's, they're now raising their hand being like, yeah, I'm willing to take the risk and change my whole life and career to come into the cannabis space because I'm valued. And that's probably the bigger actual future of marketing in the cannabis space is real leadership within the marketing community of the brands.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Those were all great answers. We just have one question left, and it might be a little self-promotional, but I think everyone wants to know a little bit more about what you guys are doing and what you're excited about in your professional lives. So the last question is really, what are you excited about that you're currently working on? And Colby, I'll start with you.
Sure. So we actually took 2020 and COVID as an opportunity to really build out from a technology perspective, robust marketing offering. And so we've now had years and years of listening to the pain points across the industry and working with and talking with a number of brands. And instead of sitting there last year saying, what the heck are we going to do? We said, here's pages and pages and pages of notes that we have from over the years of what these people want. Why don't we just take that feedback and go build exactly what they want? And so as we begin to emerge in 2021 and everybody really start to think back into how can I build my brand? How can I spend? How can we drive revenue? Enlighten is sitting there in a position where we've built a really robust suite of tools on top of our legacy tools, which are all place-based in the dispensary, really building out experiential and place-based advertising and marrying that with the digital component and really the data driven behind that digital piece to now have a full 360-degree offering that says, I understand cannabis is evolving. How do I reach and target this customer in every form and fashion? And we've now have a platform that can allow somebody to reach people anywhere that they are, so long as they're a cannabis consumer, which I think is super exciting, considering if somebody had asked me 2 years ago if this would have existed, I would have said no way. But here we are, forced by kind of COVID and some of the dynamics of the industry to evolve. And in doing so, we've made ourselves much better, not only for ourselves, but for the brands that we work with.
And what's the name of the platform?
Yeah, so the name of that platform is AdSuite, which we launched and went live at the start of the year. And Joe, who's on here, thank you for being one of our beta testers and kicking the tires back when we were developing that during the earlier days of COVID, but something that we're super excited about. And again, that's AdSuite is the name of the platform.
Great. Eugenio?
So there's two ways that we are going to be focused in the next, I'd call it 24 months. One, and probably most important to me, is social advocacy and activism, and hyper focused around voting and being involved in state and local politics. We're seeing, the voter initiatives have pretty much run the course of the states that have these voter initiatives to legalize. And now it's going to be up to, sitting legislatures to create and change the laws. And they're going to need to be pressured by their constituents. So how do we as a Cannabis Now group partner with our brands to go out and touch the consumers and the future consumers and say, hey, we want you to vote on the fact that you want legalization on the state and federal level. How do we help you? So that's number one. And that's something I think that we can, help get out the vote in that regard. And number two is film projects. We've been publishing in print for almost a decade, and just started doing film projects in the last 24 months, testing can we tell these stories in a dynamic medium such as film. And so in the next 2 years, we're going to be, and Colby, I'm going to hit you up and get your take on this, because I know you're a film guy. How do we capture these stories of the amazing brands and the amazing people behind them in a film medium and package them so that the greater community will have access to the information? It's a great way to absorb information and be entertained. And if we can be a part of that, I think it's something we can do well.
Yeah, I agree. It's super unique in that you can take an hour-long film and really allow people to understand it at a granular level, which many people haven't done. And at the same time, distill that down into bite-sized pieces to fit kind of the modern day attention spans, right? So that's super cool that you guys are pushing from the print into film, something that I love. And
the catch is, how do you entertain without it being stoner content? We have to educate people and have them not fall asleep, but we can't make it over entertaining where it's the stoner film content that's been prevalent for the last 3 or 4 years.
Agreed. Completely agreed. Love it.
Joe, what about you?
So a lot of stuff I'm excited about for the coming year. Some stuff I can't tell you about because it's top secret. And if I told you, everyone would know about it. So there is some stuff I'm not going to say that I am excited about, but things I can say I'm excited about. So we launched our line of quick products last year, and it was really, and I've been around the space for a while now. It was really the first true fast-acting edible product. And why that was so important to me is that it actually delivers a Delta 9 high versus an 11 hydroxy, which is what most edibles are, right? And so that technology shift, that change to be able to deliver a product that has a defined and fast onset, a defined offset, and a more smoker-like experience in edibles is a game changer. And we're seeing the market respond to that. And so I'm very excited that we're going to continue to take that into new markets. We're about to launch that in a couple of markets in the next month or two. So we're going to take that outside of Colorado, see how that plays in other markets, because it's such a unique product. So innovation, I'm excited about. You've heard a couple of mentions already of CSR. I'm very excited about our CSR initiatives. In fact, I'm you guys are the first to know this, but we just made an exciting new hire, a director of CSR. That was a role that we have not had previously. And so I'm excited for her to start the next couple of weeks here. And underneath that, we're going to continue to expand some of the things we've been doing, like our Cannabis for Justice website that we've built out, and really trying to, our focus has been a lot about the dialogue. It's not that we have a solution, or it's, yes, we've been involved with LPP for a year and a half and other, organizations, but it's really about having honest and open dialogue and understanding where the deficiencies are within our own company, or how to discover those deficiencies or the things you can do to make things better within your own company, and sharing our experiences to get people to think in that way. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also very excited about what I've been calling internally the year of the national brand for us, which I've had a lot of discussion about that today, but we're putting a lot of effort and a lot of resource behind taking Wana and moving it away from just, I don't say just, but the small regional or local understandings of the brand, and building out a more national focus. And that means everything from bigger campaigns to our in-store to how we approach our markets where we have licensee partners. So a lot of internal change and development there that I'm really excited about.
Awesome. All right, Nicole.
All right. Can't talk about everything, Joe, you get it. But, the areas that I'm really excited about is it's going to be product innovation, bringing some new product forms to market for the brand. That's kind of all I'll get into right now, but some really awesome things on the horizon for us, where we've really traditionally just been a flower house. So can't wait for that this year. And then, the other piece too is, we're set out to really disrupt the retail experience and just the whole customer experience that kind of has been, that weed 1.0 kind of dispensary experience. You're seeing some really awesome brands across the country just doing some, inspiring things in their retail space, and we're really hoping to follow suit. I've got my space behind me, you can't really see. So this is our one little store that we've got in North Central Phoenix, and
it looks good, by the way. I've been staring at it now for an hour. It's a good looking store.
Thank you. I can't I'm mirrored weird, so I don't know which way I'm going. But yeah, we've got this beautiful mural outside, and the inside as well is just a really beautiful store. It's a different type of customer experience, customer journey in the store. Different than just kind of walking up to a counter and interacting with your bud tender that way. So that's something that we're really committed to, is disrupting this retail space. We've got our second space opening up in Q3 this year. That's just beautifully located. It's going to be a total showstopper, and something that we're really proud to bring to market. That's hopefully is kind of the leader in the space. So that's those are kind of two big areas that we're looking forward to this year.
Wow, there's a lot going on with just you guys on this call. So thank you so much for spending the time to be part of this panel. Really great conversation. And I think that you've all been able to give some very practical advice to any cannabis marketers out there listening. So thank you again for your time, and really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for hosting, Erin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.